Ravi was born in a small village where people believed that English was only for rich city students and not for ordinary boys like him. And for many years, he also believed this lie, because in his school, the English teacher came only twice a week, read from the book without explaining much, and left. And Ravi memorized answers without understanding a single sentence. So, whenever he saw someone speaking English confidently on television or on a mobile screen, he felt a strange mixture of admiration, fear, and shame, thinking that English was a mountain too high for him to ever climb. But one rainy evening, when the electricity was gone, and he was sitting with his grandfather near a dim lantern, his grandfather told him a story about how he had once learned to read Hindi newspapers as an adult by practicing every day without caring about mistakes. And that simple story planted a silent seed in Ravi's heart. And that night, he decided that he would at least try to learn English. Not to impress anyone, but to change the limits he had accepted for himself. The very next day, he borrowed an old English grammar book from his school library with torn pages and missing answers, downloaded a free English learning app on his slow smartphone, and started with the alphabet, even though he felt embarrassed to begin so small. Yet he soon realized that learning English was not about showing off, but about building a strong foundation. So every morning before going to school, he spent 15 minutes reading letters, simple words, and basic sounds, repeating them again and again until his tongue slowly began to accept unfamiliar pronunciations. And in the evening, he listened to children's English videos on YouTube because he could understand their slow and clear speech better than adult movies. And at first, he understood almost nothing except a few words like hello, good morning, and thank you. But instead of giving up, he wrote those few words in a small notebook and used them whenever he could, greeting his friends with hello even when they laughed at him, and thanking his teacher in English, though his voice trembled with nervousness. And with every small use, his fear became a little weaker. Months passed, and Ravi learned that English was not one big subject, but a collection of small habits: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So he decided to touch all four every day in some way, even if only for a few minutes. And he started reading short English stories meant for beginners, underlining new words, checking their meaning in a dictionary, and then trying to use them in his own sentences. And when exams came, he performed slightly better than before, not because he memorized more, but because he finally understood what he was studying. And that tiny improvement acted like fuel to his motivation, showing him that effort truly worked. Because they believed he would embarrass himself, a strange courage rose inside him, and he wrote his name on the participant list with shaking hands, spending nights practicing his speech in front of a cracked mirror, recording his voice on his phone, listening to his own mistakes, correcting his pronunciation, and trying again, and again, until finally on the day of the competition, his legs trembled as he stood on the stage. But when he began to speak, something magical happened. His words, though imperfect, began to flow, and the audience listened, not because he was perfect, but because he was sincere. And when he finished, he did not win any prize, yet he returned home with a smile wider than any trophy could give. Because for the first time he had truly used English to express his thoughts. From that day forward, he stopped waiting for perfect conditions and used English whenever possible. talking to himself while walking to school, describing what he saw in simple sentences, thinking in English while doing daily chores, changing his phone language to English, even though it confused him at first, and reading signboards, advertisements, and headlines loudly whenever he found English words in public places. And slowly, his brain started reacting to English not as a stranger, but as a familiar guest. In higher classes, Ravi discovered that learning English was not only about grammar rules, but about exposure and consistency. And when he met a new English teacher who encouraged students to speak without fear of punishment, he realized how important the learning environment was. Because for the first time, mistakes were treated as steps, not sins, and Ravi took full advantage of this space, asking a question without hesitation, participating in group discussions, and even helping weaker students, which strengthened his own confidence and clarity, because teaching others forced him to think deeply about what he had learned. At home, things were not always easy, because his parents wanted him to focus only on memorized subjects that gave quick marks, and sometimes they scolded him for wasting time on English videos and storybooks. But Ravi respectfully explained that English was not a luxury, but a tool that would open future opportunities. And though they did not fully understand, they allowed him to continue his efforts, seeing his dedication. During his college years, the real test began, because almost all textbooks, lectures, and competitive exam materials were in English, and many of his classmates from big cities had advanced fluency, while he struggled to follow fast lectures. Returned like a shadow, making him doubt whether all his effort had been enough. But instead of surrendering, he adjusted his strategy, recording lectures with permission, listening to them repeatedly at home, pausing to check meanings, rewriting notes in simple English, and slowly training his ears to handle speed and accents. And he joined an online speaking group where students from different states met to practice English daily for 15 minutes, discussing simple topics like daily routine, hobbies, or news headlines. And at first, Ravi spoke slowly, with many pauses and errors. But nobody mocked him, because everyone there was struggling. And that safe space helped him remove the invisible chain that fear had placed on his tongue. As time passed, Ravi learned an important truth that no book had ever clearly told him, that fluency is not born in the classroom, but in daily usage. And the way he learned, shifting his focus from "I must be correct" to "I must communicate," and this mindset made his speech faster, his confidence stronger, and his learning process joyful instead of stressful. And one day, when he went for his first job interview and answered questions in clear English with only minor mistakes, he saw surprise on the interviewer's face, not because Ravi was the best speaker, but because he spoke naturally, honestly, and without fear. And when he got the job, with a modest salary, he did not celebrate the money, but the journey that had led him there. After starting work, Ravi continued learning because he understood that language is a living skill that grows only when used. So he listened to English podcasts while traveling, watched news without subtitles, read one English article every day, wrote short diary entries about his experiences, and even started helping junior students in his village by forming a small, free English practice group under a banyan tree on Sundays, where students from poor backgrounds gathered to speak without shame. repeat after him, read aloud from newspapers, and slowly build confidence just as he once did. And when he saw their eyes sparkle the first time they spoke a full English sentence in public, he saw his own past reflected in them. Years later, when Ravi returned to his old school as a guest speaker, he stood in front of students who looked just like he once had, nervous, uncertain, and full of hidden potential, and he told them not that English was easy, but that it was possible for anyone who was ready to practice daily without fear. And he explained that they did not need expensive coaching, foreign teachers, or big city schools, but only 3 things: consistency, curiosity, and courage to make mistakes, because English is not owned by any class or city. It is simply a language waiting to be used by those who dare to learn it. And as he ended his speech, in the same classroom where he once trembled to say even a single English sentence, Ravi realized that learning English had not just taught him a language, it had taught him discipline, resilience, confidence, and the courage to challenge limits. And with quiet pride, he watched his students repeat simple English sentences after him, knowing that somewhere among them, another silent seed had been planted, just as it once had been planted in his own heart on a rainy evening long ago.